welcome to this session. In this session, we will be again discussing about Samkhya metaphysics, a part of Samkhya metaphysics known as Prakriti. If you have listened to me in earlier classes, we had discussed that how Samkhya establishes their doctrine or principle Satkaryavada, which is known as theory of causation. While they describing Satkaryavada, they said that every effect exists in its material cause prior to its production. This view is criticized or rejected by Nyaya Vaisheshika and other scholars. However, all the criticism against Samkhya defended by establishing their theory known as Satkaryavada. They also said that Satkaryavada are of two types, one is Parinamavada, another is Vivartavada. Parinamavada is the doctrine where you find the effect is the true transformation from the cause, that is called Parinamavada. In case of Vivartavada, the effect, it is just an appearance and which already exists in its material cause. Now we will discuss that if everything created in this universe because of flow of cause and effect, then what is the real cause to create this universe as a diversified universe? Because in this universe you find different objects, different people, different animals, different creatures, and also sea, tree, stones, various objects in this world, both bodily and non-bodily. However, question arises, if every effect has a cause and whatever we see cause, for example, we see a pot, the cause will be clay, we see a cord, if the cause will be milk, then what is the real cause for creating the diversified universe? This is the question people ask to Samkhya. Now Samkhya how replies to these questions and how establishes their theory Satkaryavada once again, that we will be discussing in this session. This session is completely devoted on the discussion of Prakriti. According to Samkhya, Prakriti is the sole responsible for creating the whole universe, both gross objects as well as subtle objects. The gross objects like chair, table, stones, mountain, siege, chalkpiece, desk, etc. And the subtle objects like mind, intellect, ego, ahankara, etc. Because mind and intellect you cannot perceive like table and chair, you can only infer, it is so subtle objects. So henceforth, according to Samkhya, they claim that both gross and subtle objects are created and these are already found in the hidden form in its cause or in its material cause known as Prakriti. Now let us discuss what really Prakriti is about, how they define Prakriti. For them, Prakriti is an eternal, it is unconscious. In Sanskrit, unconscious you can say jada. Prakriti also according to them is ubiquitous, it is all pervading and it finds in each and every object of the world that we see, perceive in this earth. Therefore, they claim that if all the objects that we see in this world, if there is a cause behind this, it is nothing but a Prakriti. Prakriti helps to create all these objects in this world. However, Prakriti itself is uncaused, it is beyond the cause effect relation. Being the source of all effects, it is beyond the cause effect relation. It cannot adhere to the causal relation. We cannot explain Prakriti based on the causal relation. What it is saying that if every effect must have a cause and there must be a cause for creating the whole world and that this cause is nothing but the Prakriti. However, the Prakriti cannot be considered an effect and we cannot ask for the cause of Prakriti, because Prakriti being the ultimate cause or known as Pradhana is responsible for creating the whole universe in a diversified form. So therefore it is beyond the causation, it is known as causa, it is the sole or principal cause for creating the whole universe. Now let us discuss about more elaborate way how Samkhya established their theory Satkaryavada, and also they told and claimed that Prakriti is the material cause to create the whole universe. So this discussion is part of the metaphysics in Samkhya philosophy. Now let us discuss how they really describe or explain about the Prakriti, and what are the argument they have given for establishing that there is an existence of Prakriti which is beyond the causation, however responsible for creating the whole universe and responsible for creating the different objects in this universe. The first slide that I said that what is Prakriti. The Samkhya philosophy subscribed the principle Satkaryavada that, as you know, is known as theory of causation. What they mean is that the effect exists in its material cause prior to its production. They also said that Satkaryavada can be interpreted in this way: a real transformation of the material cause that we find in the effect. That means if somebody claims that milk and curd are totally different objects, then Samkhya philosophy claimed that in this case milk and curd, it is a truly transformation or the real transformation from the material cause milk to the curd as an effect. The root cause, the question arises, as I have told you now, that if everything has a cause and effect, that if every object has its own cause, or every effect must have a cause and the effect inheres in its cause prior to its production, then what is the ultimate cause of this creation of the universe? Samkhya argued that it is the Prakriti within quote and unquote which helps to create the objects of the world in this universe in a diversified form. They also claimed that Prakriti is extracted from two words, one is kru together with the prefix pra, which means making or placing at first. That means Prakriti being the first cause cannot be considered as an effect, and we cannot ask for Prakriti being an effect, what is its cause. Here they claim that Prakriti is the ultimate cause and is the root cause, and it cannot be considered as an effect. Henceforth we cannot ask what is the cause of Prakriti. In a short, Prakriti cannot be considered as an effect, it is beyond the cause effect relation. Thus for them everything except Prakriti has a cause. Prakriti also responsible for creating both subtle objects as well as gross objects. As I said, the gross objects maybe you can consider the objects, the animals, the creature that you see in this earth, and the subtle objects that you can only infer, it cannot be perceived, it can only infer through its effects. For example, mind, senses, intellect. The senses you cannot see it. When you get some smell, that you cannot see it, that you cannot touch it, but you can feel it. Therefore these are called the subtle objects. In the same of intellect, you think something differently. How you think, that you cannot see, but what you think in a form of objects or matter, that you can see. Henceforth now you can find the difference between gross object and subtle objects. In case of subtle objects, it is very light, you cannot see it. For example, intellect or ego, you have an ego on certain fact or certain issue, that you cannot see it, but you can only analyze it. However, if I can say that there is a table, the table can be touched, it can be seen, it can also use it for different purpose. Henceforth you can make a differentiate between gross object and subtle objects, and Samkhya claims that Prakriti is the responsible or the material cause for the creation of both gross and subtle objects in this earth. Now moving further, said that Prakriti exists beyond the causality. As I said, you cannot claim that Prakriti being an effect, what is its cause, because it's first it's create the whole universe, and after that it detached from all the effects of the universe. Therefore it is the cause, and once the things are created, it cannot be part of that. Therefore it is the sole cause or the ultimate cause, or you can say the root cause for creating the whole universe. Therefore, it is known as pradhana, that means a chief or a principal cause. It is eternal, it is ever dynamic, it is the same time unconscious, and also it finds everywhere in this earth in the form of objects, in the form of selves, everything. For example, there is a human being, also you find there is a Prakriti inside in him or her. If you find an objects or a non-humans or an animal, also Prakriti find in it. In this context, Locacharya, as a supporter of Samkhya philosophy, writes that we call Prakriti the ultimate cause because it deals with all the distortion, that means it is responsible for creating the whole objects and non-objects of this earth. It is called avidya because it contradicts knowledge. What he means here is that whatever the knowledge that we have in this earth, depending on our experience or empirical evidences, it is a valid knowledge. But Prakriti is a knowledge that you cannot experience, you cannot verify it in evidence form, you can only infer to that. Therefore, people say that if something cannot be touched, something cannot be perceived, something cannot be known through the sense organs, how can you claim that particular things or element or object exists? This is the claim made by the other schools against Samkhya. Samkhya philosophy, they said that Prakriti is the ultimate cause, it cannot be perceived. If something is perceived, this is very relative, this is limited, whereas Prakriti is not relative or limited, it is beyond all this, it is being the principal cause, it is detached from all this quality. Henceforth, Prakriti is the material cause which is responsible for the creation of the all objects in this world in the form of effect, can only be inferred. Therefore, the knowledge about the Prakriti cannot be perceived. In this context, it is said that since it cannot be perceived, it is our avidya or ignorance that we can think that something exists which cannot be known through our sense organs. Therefore, Locacharya said that it is avidya. Locacharya also said that it is Maya. The Prakriti can be called as Maya because it evolves the varied creation. What he means here is that because of Maya, because of the Maya, because of the avidya or ignorance, we see the things differently because things are different. We claim that a chair is different from table because we perceive these two objects differently. It is because of the Maya or the elements of Prakriti responsible to differentiate a table from the chair, a sea from the ocean, a lake from the pond, a chalk piece from the duster, a water bottle from a water can. It is because of the Maya we perceive different people in a different places, even the same people in a different places. We identify a person in a different places having the same name. It is because of Maya we say that everything is bounded, everything is relative, and this is happening just because the elements of Prakriti. In this way, you find Samkhya describes Prakriti. Now, a little bit more, they said that Prakriti is very subtle and invisible like mind intellect. If it is a gross, then you can verify it through the evidential, but since it is a subtle like a mind and intellect, you can only infer or realize, but you cannot know through your sense experience, neither through touching, nor through perceiving, nor through hearing, nor any kind of feeling. Further, they said that since it is known through the inference or anumana, it is called as anuma. The Prakriti, another name of Prakriti is anuma. It is in the form of unconscious elements. That means Prakriti also is known as jada. It is unlimited because all the objects that we see in this world, these are relative, these are limited, but being the cause, being the principal cause, it is unlimited, but it is an active force. Being an unconscious element also, it is an active force. that is what it is called Shakti. That means there is a power in it. As a result, it is capable to produce the different objects that you see, that we know through our sense organs in this earth. What they mean is that, if I will be telling you the story, that is the story that I told you in the last class. If the milk does not have a potential to produce curd, that means curd as an effect can be derived from various other liquids like kerosene, petrol, diesel, but which is not the case. That means a effect exists in its material cause prior to its production, and the cause has its own potential to produce a certain effect. Henceforth, the material cause have its own Shakti, or the power through which the effect will be produced. As a result, you find that every effect has a particular cause, it cannot have a various causes. For example, if you find that oil, it will comes from a particular oil seeds. It cannot be comes from other liquids. You cannot get oil from, say, stones, say from seeds, from rice, nowhere. You get oil seeds, you get oil from the oil seeds. So therefore, the oil seeds as the material cause has its own potential, have its own Shakti to create, to produce oil. In the same way, it is argued that the Prakriti is a material cause, has its own power or Shakti. As a result, it produces different objects that we know through our sense experiences. Therefore, Prakriti, also known as Shakti, the last said that it is in the form of unmanifested objects. That means it is an Abhyakta. Being a principal cause, you find it is a material cause and a principal cause which is really responsible, or which the material cause creates the whole universe in a different form, in a particular order, but it is found in the form of unmanifested. In all objects that you see, you never find Prakriti directly. What you can find, that you always find Prakriti or the element of Prakriti in different objects of the world, and you know through by the help of inference. You infer that there is a cause behind this, and this cause only to be inferred, it cannot be perceived nor can be known from other sense organs or sense experience. Therefore, it is called Abhyakta, that means which cannot be explained, which cannot be Vyakta. It is in the form of unmanifested, which only can be realized, which only can be experienced, which only can be inferred, but which whatever you explain, it cannot be the proper explain of the Prakriti, because Prakriti being the subtle, being the unconscious, being the ultimate cause, you cannot see it, cannot touch it, cannot feel it, you cannot hear anything from it. However, you can infer it, you can realize that, because there is an argument behind that. There is also argument known as Satkaryavada, that means there is a real cause which cannot be considered an effect, which does not have further causes, which is the ultimate cause known as Prakriti, the responsible for the creation of the whole universe. Being the principal cause, or known as Pradhana, it is Abhyakta, it cannot be explained in a true sense. Whatever way we explain, only to define, only to understand the concept Prakriti, but in true sense, any way we explain, it cannot be the complete explanation of the Prakriti. Now, moving further, Prakriti being the first cause, why and how we can claim that Prakriti is the first cause? Some of the arguments that you have already discussed, few arguments left that we will be discussing now. The universe is full of causes and effects, as you know that if milk is the effect, then cow will be its cause, and cow will be the effect, then there will be its causes. If we are the effect, then our cause will be parents. If our parents will be the effects, then their parents will be their causes. In the same way, you find the whole universe is full of causes and effects, or in the flow of causes and effects. The world consists of objects, and those are considered as effects, because each objects that we see in this earth are effects form. Henceforth, there must be a cause behind that, and if this is so, then what is the real cause or material cause for creating the whole diversified universe? It cannot be a self, or cannot be a human being, cannot be Purusha, because Purusha, as defined by Samkhya, it is free from the cause and effect. It is not responsible for the cause of the whole world, because it does not have that kind of patent to create the objects of the world. Purusha being the self, it is found in every animate objects of the world. In all creatures you find Purusha. According to Samkhya, there is not only one Purusha, there are various Purushas, there are multiple Purushas. Henceforth, Purusha being a multiple cannot be responsible for creating the whole universe of the world. It does not have any patent, because different Purusha you find in different animate objects. Henceforth, Purusha not being the responsible for creating the whole universe, then there might be some other principles which is far from the Purusha, which is not self. The Purusha or not self, if this is not responsible for creating the whole universe, then there might be some other principle responsible for creating the whole universe. And that principles, what is that principle? According to Samkhya, it is Prakriti. However, Nyaya Vaisheshika, they argues that, Charvaka, Buddhism, they also argues that there are material atoms or constituent elements can be considered as the material cause for creating the whole universe. The different proportion of the material cause, that is air, fire, water, earth, these four elements having a different components mix with each other and creates a different objects in this earth. I repeat, according to Nyaya Vaisheshika Buddhism and Charvaka, they said that if we at all we consider the all objects in this world that we see or that we know through our experience or through our sense experience, it is the effect, then the real cause would be the elements or the material atoms. There are four atoms, one is earth, another is fire, the third one is water, and fourth one is air. These are the four elements. According to them, these are the material cause for creating the whole objects of the world. Because of their different proportion, they mix with each other, and henceforth we see different objects in this world. Here Samkhya argues that the other principle that you say that if Purusha is not responsible or the selves are not responsible for creating the whole universe, then there will be other principle which is really the cause for the creating the whole universe of the world. Then Samkhya argues, as Nyayakas, you argued that there are four atoms or four elements, different proportion, really causes for creating the whole universe. Can these four elements together mix up in a different proportion and creates the subtle elements like a mind, intellect and ego? Because these are the subtle elements, it cannot be known through our sense experience, it can only to be inferred. Here Nyaya Vaisheshika has no reply. Therefore Samkhya says that if the material atoms are the real cause, then only it will be limited for creating the gross objects. Then what about the subtle objects? The world is not only about the gross objects. In the world you find both subtle objects as well as gross objects. If you find there are two different kinds of objects, subtle and gross objects, then it is not certainly the material atoms responsible for creating the whole effects, both subtle and gross form. Henceforth, the Nyaya Vaisheshika argument is rejected by Samkhya and said that it is the Prakriti which is eternal, ubiquitous, all pervading, is responsible for creating the whole universe or the objects of the world in this earth. This is the brief about the Prakriti. Further they said that in the evolution of things the cause is subtle than the effect, and that pervades in the effect. For example, according to Samkhya, while rejecting the Nyaya Vaisheshika and Buddhist Jainism arguments that earth, water, fire and air are the responsible for creating the whole universe, they said that being the Prakriti is responsible for creating both gross and subtle objects, we find the cause is subtler than the effect. If the cause is the seed, see how subtle it is, the effect will be tree, though there will be argument lies whether seed is the first or tree is the effect, whether tree is the cause, seed is the effect, or seed is the cause, tree is the effect. But here we will find that if take seed is the cause, you put seed are sown in the earth, and then therefore the small plant grow up. In that case you find the gross object is a plant and the subtle element is a seed. In this case, in other case like egg, if you find egg is a very subtle, but you find hen or cock, when it will be grow up, when it will take different birth, then it will be gross objects. Henceforth here it is claimed that the cause is more subtle than the gross object, and henceforth the Prakriti is much subtler and unconscious, the responsible for creating such a gross as well as subtler objects in this earth. They said that now to understand Prakriti in a true spirit, the ultimate cause of the world must be some unintelligent or unconscious principle which is uncaused, eternal, all pervading, and it is fine. It is very fine. That means it is so fine that no other fineness can be found in other objects, but it is always ready to produce the world of objects. This is the Prakriti on the account of Samkhya system. Now this is the time you have understood what Samkhya means by Prakriti and how they explain Prakriti and how they establish Prakriti. They said that Prakriti being the fundamental or the first cause, it is responsible for creating the whole objects in this earth. Therefore Prakriti is also known as Kaujasvi. It is absolute, eternal, because a relative and non-eternal element cannot be the fundamental cause of the world. What they say or what the claim is that if something is relative, if something is non-eternal, cannot be creating the whole universe as such, or as we find in the diversified objects in this world. Can you claim a point by stating that it is an individual, a particular individual or self is responsible for creating the whole diversified objects in the world? Here Samkhya argues that all selves are relative because they have a limited knowledge, they are not eternal, they are not finding in other objects. The cause should be eternal and all pervading, and it should be find all the objects in this earth, both subtle and gross objects. And what is that? According to Samkhya, it is nothing but the Prakriti. Henceforth they said that Prakriti is not being the relative and the limited element, it is the responsible, it is taken the responsible to create the whole objects of this world, or it is the sole cause for creating the different objects in this earth. Now we will see that distinction between objects and Prakriti. Now after creating the objects that you find in this earth, how Prakriti will be differentiated from the objects. As I said that objects that we find in this earth are relative, are limited, are subject to created and destroyed. The objects that you see, the chair that you see, it will be destroyed after some time, but the cause cannot be destroyed, and after destroying of the chair it will be again turns back to its root cause, that is a Prakriti. And henceforth you find objects are relative, limited, subject to creation and destruction. However Prakriti is far from the creation and destruction. Once it created, it is detached from that, but however the some element of Prakriti that you find in all the objects of the world, and henceforth we can infer that there is a Prakriti which is really the material cause for creating that effect. That way they said that, if you can read my points, objects are effects of Prakriti. These are the dependent, created, destroyed, relative, many and non-eternal. Prakriti has neither beginning nor an end because it is unborn, independent, absolute, eternal, and beyond the creation and destruction. Objects are limited within the space-time continuum, but Prakriti is beyond that, because anything that we find, that we perceive, that we know through the sense organs, it is space-time bounded, it is within the space-time continuum. However Prakriti is beyond to that. Objects manifest in a different form, however Prakriti is unmanifest, it is without parts. Thus Besa, as a supporter of Samkhya philosophy, Samkhya system, said that Prakriti having this ultimate cause is both is and is not. Is means it is the ultimate cause, it is the eternal, it is find, it is the material cause. Is not means the elements of the Prakriti that we find all the objects in this earth. The effect are the objects, where the small elements of Prakriti that we find, that is not. However, Prakriti also find in a is form, that is eternal, which is only inferred, cannot be perceived. Therefore, Vyasa said that Prakriti both is and is not. The last point that I bring to your notice, that Prakriti is inferred, it cannot be known from any of the sense organs. It is only inferred on the basis of the objects that we see in this world. Neither we can touch nor we can hear the sounds of Prakriti. Therefore, for our own understanding, in our practical standpoint, we can say that Prakriti is just a name, that name only to be explained, only to be realized, only to be inferred, but it cannot be perceived, it cannot be known through any of the sense organs. Like we know the objects in this earth through the sense organs, however, Prakriti is not known through our sense organs. Now, we will see how that Ishwar Krishna, the commentary, in his commentary, Samkhya Karika, discussed about the existence of Prakriti in his Sanskrit shloka. By giving the shloka, Ishwar Krishna written, Vedanam parimanat samanbayat karyata prabhrutischaka karana karyat vibhagat abhibhagat vaisharupasya. Again I am reading it, Vedanam parimanat samanbayat karyata prabhrutischa karana karya vibhagat abhibhagat vaisharupasya. That this shloka you find in Samkhya Karika written by Ishwar Krishna. Here you find there are 5 components. These 5 components through which Ishwar Krishna describes that how Prakriti to be established, how Prakriti being the ultimate cause for creating the whole objects in this universe. The first one, they said that Vedanam parimanat. Vedana means it is a difference, one object different from others. You cannot say that all the objects that we find in this world having the one and the same. We see the objects differently because they are different. Vedanam parimanat. Parimanat means it is magnitude. That means you say that if every effect has a cause and all the world that we find in the form of objects having the cause and effect relation, then what is the ultimate cause? The ultimate cause cannot be an finite objects. It cannot be a limited objects or relative objects. Therefore, Prakriti being the subtle objects or the unconscious elements creates the whole universe. Therefore, they said that being Prakriti, which is different from the objects, in the one hand objects is finite, it is relative, it is limited. However, the Prakriti is unlimited, not relative, it is beyond the causation, and therefore it is the responsible, or it is one of the arguments saying that being the eternal ubiquitous, it is the material cause for creating the whole universe. The second point, they said that Vedanam samanbayat, that means something is common you find in all objects. That means we call that all these chair, table, dusters are hard object. You say that waters, both in a water bottle, in a glass, if there is a water, in a pond, in a lake, you say water is liquid. That means there is some commonality you find between all objects or some objects. Therefore, we find the commonness of pain, pleasure and indifference among different objects. Henceforth, since the commonality, it inferred that there might be one material cause for creating the whole universe. Water has a liquidity that you find, whether you will find in an ocean or lake or pond or even a bottle, water bottle. Being the commonness, it is inferred that there one material cause responsible for creating, these are the effects in a different form. Now the third point, they said that karyatah pravritischa, that means the effect is implicitly contained in the material cause. That means if there is an ornament, the effect, the material cause is gold. Once you melt that ornament, again it will be goes back to the material cause gold. In the same way, once the things are destroyed, the objects destroyed in this earth, again it goes back to its own form, which is found in the Prakriti. That means Prakriti is its own capability or ability to produce the different things in this earth. Once the things are produced and once they are, after its use and purpose will be solved, once it is destroyed, again it goes back to its material cause known as Prakriti. So these are the three arguments that given by the Samkhya. The fourth argument, they said that Karana Karya Vibhagat, that means the limited effect cannot be the cause of the universe. That means if you say that x or y is the cause, or milk is the cause of curd and so forth, or ghee so and so forth, here he is saying that milk is the limited cause, it has a creation and destruction, but again milk will be the effect and it has its own cause. However, the principal cause or the material cause cannot be considered an effect, and it cannot be have further causes, which is known as Prakriti. That means there must be a sole causes which is responsible for all the objects in this earth, which is bounded with cause effect relation, causal relation, but the material cause, the sole cause or the pradhana, which is the root cause, cannot be attached with the causal relation, it is beyond the cause effect relation, which is known as Prakriti. The last argument the Samkhya given is that Abhibhagat Vaisarupasya, that means the essence of the world is not different. What they mean is that all objects that you find in this earth have a particular essence, that means it has its own existence. If an object is not capable to convey some meaning, that means we perceive the chair because chair has a capability, the object chair has a capability of some kind of action that it caters for. That means in a chair we sit, we use the chair for different purposes, and the same purposes we cannot use the tables or in other objects. Henceforth, they say that chair has a particular component or a capable or a power or a Shakti through which we identify that object as a chair, which not similarly we find in other objects like table, desk and almirah, etc., etc. Therefore, you find each and every object has a particular essence. Because of the essence, you find each and every object has an essence, and the essence will be same, and because of the essence we identify the object differently, because different object has a different essence, and through which essence within quote and unquote is the effect, or you say that this is the region, we infer that there must be a cause which really responsible for bringing out different essence in a different objects. Therefore, the Prakriti is the ultimate cause for creating the whole universe, which found in a different objects in this earth, and different objects has a different essence. These are the 5 arguments Ishwar Krishna given in his Samkhya Karika for establishing or for arguing the existence of Prakriti as an ultimate or the root cause for creating the different objects in this earth. Now, coming gunas of Prakriti, according to Samkhya, in the Prakriti they said that it is Prakriti itself has its own gunas. There are 3 gunas that we find in the Prakriti. These are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Sattva appears to be white, Rajas appears to be red, and Tamas appears to be black. These are the 3 elements mixed together in some or other proportions and creates the different objects. Therefore, you find different elements or the different essence in different objects of this earth. You find different essence in different objects in this earth. You find different kind of exceptional, different kind of uniqueness in different objects in this earth. They said that the Sattva, Raja, Tama are responsible for creating the different objects in this earth, and the equilibrium state of these 3 gunas Sattva, Raja, Tama is nothing but a Prakriti. Now you can understood what is really Prakriti means. The Sattva, Raja, Tama, if they are in a tranquility position, in a equilibrium position, then you say that this is nothing but a Prakriti. So, Sattva, it has a nature of pleasure, it is a nature of lightness, it is not heavy, it is a illuminating, it is a bright, the tendency towards consciousness, manifestation in the senses, mind, intellect. Sattva can be understood in this way. Sattva is a very light, it is not heavy, it is a very pleasure. Again, it helps to us to think something, it also helps to our sense organs to identify some object as it is. For example, the Sattva helps blazing of a fire, upward course of a vapor, and we see our image in the mirror because of Sattva guna. It is believed to be white. Here, this is the point that I like to bring a notice, that gunas can be understood as a quality or a secondary in a Sanskrit, the meaning of Sanskrit term, but here gunas are substances. That means these are not qualities. According to Samkhya, gunas are substances, are not qualities, though gunas are understood as qualities in a Sanskrit term, but here according to Samkhya it is substances. There are substances you find sattva, raja, tamas. Sattvas I have said, and I said that sattvas are light, are not heavy, its nature is pleasure and also lightning. If you see your image in the mirror as a replica, it is because of sattva guna, because it is a lightning. If you see rajas, rajas is an active, it is nature is an activity. That means if wind is blow, if fire spreads, that is the quality of rajas. It is always in the motions, it makes something to active. However, the tamas guna is black, it is just opposite to sattva guna. Sattva guna, it is a drowsiness, it is laziness, its color is black. It helps for destroying some objects in this world, because as you know that no objects can sustain in this earth for a lifelong period. Everything has to be created and destroyed. Therefore, tamas helps for destroying to some of the objects in this earth. Now we will see how these three components are responsible and what are the relation between three gunas or three substances, sattva, raja and tamas. Now these three gunas contradict as well as cooperate with each other when the Prakriti creates the objects in this earth. None of them exist alone. These three gunas are related and interconnected with each other. These three constituent elements are found in objects of the world as like oil and fire. Though oil and fire, they are mutually disagree with each other. However, the oil helps the fire to burn. In the same way, though the sattva, raja, tamas has a different qualities, different attributes, still these three helps together, mix up together in a different proportion to create the objects of the world in a different form. These three constituent element continuously changing, because it cannot remain fixed even in a single moment. Therefore, because of their different mixing in a continuous process, we find different objects in this earth, and henceforth we find different essence in a different objects in this earth. Now there is a two types of transformation that we find in this earth. One is swarupa, another is virupa. I said that these three elements, that sattva, raja and tamas, these three substances has a different qualities, different attributes, and these three are mixing up together with each other for creating or producing different objects in this world. In case of swarupa, that means when there is a creation of the world, when there is a objects creates, these three gunas changes within it themselves without disturbing others. That means sattva changes in sattvas, rajas changes in rajas, tamas changes in tamas. However, they say that while the changes among themselves, they do not disturb others. Sattva never disturbs neither rajas and tamas. In the same way, rajas never disturbs sattva and tamas never disturb rajas and sattva. They changes among themselves. In the stage, the guna cannot produce anything. This kind of homogeneous you find. The transformation here you kind of homogeneous. But in case of when something is produced in the form of objects, say chair, tables, human beings, creatures, in that kind these three gunas mix up with each other. One guna try to dominate others, two guna. If sattva try to dominate two other guna, you find sattva quality. That means lightness. If a rajas dominates these two gunas, you find some kind of activity in that object. But if tamas guna dominates sattva and rajas guna, you find a different, that is a different objects. Therefore, the creation you find heterogeneous in nature, it is not homogeneous in nature. So therefore, you find two kind of manifestation while gunas are interconnecting with each other and responsible for creating different objects in the world. You find two kind of objects, one is gross and subtle objects. In case of subtle objects, you find sattva changes among sattva, rajas changes within itself, and rajas and tamas changing within themselves. However, in case of virupa, which is a transformation, there you find that each guna try to dominate other two, henceforth the new creation starts, which is a heterogeneous in nature, which is opposed to the homogeneous in nature. Swarupa transformation, in case of swarupa transformation or swarupa parinama, you find that there is a homogeneous nature. In case of virupa parinama, you find the heterogeneous nature. It is the starting point of world's creation. That now I like to bring a notice that how the Parinamavada, that Samkhya theory also subscribes. In case of Parinamavada, they said that the effect is the real transformation of the cause. If this is the things you have understood, now try to understand Swarupa Guna. In Swarupa Guna, is nothing changed. In the Prakriti, there is three substances changing among themselves. It is a homogeneous in nature. But in case of Virupa Parinama, there you find that truly a new creation of the objects. Therefore, true transformation you find based on the gunas that you find in Prakriti. Now, there are three criticisms against this Prakriti being the sole cause responsible for creating the whole universe. First, they said that being Prakriti is an absolute, is an eternal, is an unconscious element. Unconscious in Sanskrit is jada. Being an unconscious element, how can it will be active? If it is not an active, then how it will be responsible for creating the whole objects in a different form? So this is the first criticism made against the existence of Prakriti, as Prakriti being responsible for the creation of the whole objects in the world. Our second criticism made against the existence of Prakriti is that Prakriti will be described in Samkhya philosophy in that way. Prakriti will be described as a female. She has a supernatural quality. She attracts a Purusha to create the whole universe. When Purusha comes to the Prakriti, she disappears. So in that case, it is said that being considered as a she is a relative. It is a limited. How can a being a limited and relative element or a bodily objects or constituent being a responsible for creating the different objects or multiple objects in this world? The second criticism. The third criticism made against the Prakriti being the root cause of this universe is that the Prakriti is different from Purusha. When Purusha comes to the existence, Prakriti vanishes. If Prakriti being the material cause, we need some efficient cause. Just a Prakriti being a material cause, it cannot be responsible for creating the different objects in this world. That means if there is material cause clay, the clay automatically cannot produce pot, bowl or different kind of effects. There must be an efficient cause involved. There must be an artist who will be involving or who will be taking out a different shape, let us say pot or from the clay, being clay the material cause. If there is no efficient cause, if there is no artist who will be taking the material cause and creating the different objects, just the material cause cannot create automatically different objects in this earth, though it will be responsible for creating different objects. However, we need an efficient cause. Therefore, Prakriti is not just the sole cause for creating the whole universe. We need an efficient cause. So there are three criticisms made against Samkhya argument against establishing the theory or the principle saying that Prakriti is the real cause of the different objects that we see in this earth. Henceforth, they said that the whole universe that we find may be created by the Prakriti, but responsible by some of the efficient person or the artist or the efficient cause. We need an efficient cause for taking out, for using the material cause to produce some of the effects. So these are the three arguments made against Samkhya theory, Samkhya principle of Prakriti, or Samkhya argument on Prakriti as being the responsible or root cause for creating the different objects in this universe. Now I believe you understood what is really the argument that Samkhya try to argue for establishing the existence of universe, and how Samkhya argues Prakriti and how they explain Prakriti. I thank you for your understanding Samkhya way of explaining the existence of different objects in this earth or the creation of this universe. Thank you.